Lesson 4.2, Finding Slope from Graphs and Tables. We are starting this unit with really focusing a lot on slope. And you guys had learned slope last year, so you probably have a good foundation for kind of what we're talking about today. Let's recall that when we talk about slope, we say rise over run. And we think about rise as the change in y. All right, we think about rise as the change in y. And we think about run as the change in x. All right, you are probably going to see something like this. It looks like a triangle y over triangle x. This is these triangles are Greek symbols that mean we say delta, delta y, delta x. It just means change in y, change in x. So that's just another way to talk about it. All right. So before we move on, can I just have you guys briefly recall that when we have a slope like this that's increasing, we say positive slope. Let me zoom in here. Okay, we say that this is a positive slope. If we have it where it is decreasing, this is a negative slope. If we have slope that is a horizontal line, the slope is zero slope, the actual number 0. And then if we have a vertical line, this is the weird one. We say in this case the slope is undefined. So we have 4 different kinds of slope for linear equations. All right, let's go ahead and let's look at how we calculate slope. Let's start with number 1. Number 1. All right, our b value is our y-intercepts. So in this case, that is just positive 1. Our slope is a little bit different. So what I tell my students is I tell them to find pretty points on a line. Like this is a pretty point, this is a pretty point, this is a pretty point. A pretty point is just any place that is a point that crosses right at those grid lines. Makes it really easy to say their coordinates. So I'm going to say find pretty points. Okay. Once you have found a couple of good points, you honestly only need 2, you're going to start calculating the slope by really thinking about rise over run. Right, from this point to this point, how much did I rise? How much did I rise? Okay, well that's just 2. And how much did I run? Okay, well that's just 1. So my rise is a 2 and my run is a 1. And we always simplify if we can, and 2 divided by 1 is 2. So in this case, we would say that my slope, m, is 2. Always double check, is it positive or negative? Well, this line is increasing from left to right, so I know that it is in fact just a positive 2, so I'm going to leave it alone. All right, let's look at the next one. On this next one, similar to the first one, let's find our y-intercept first. Right, that's just this point right here. So in this case, the y-intercept, right, my b value is 2. And let's find my slope. We're going to find some pretty points. Let's see here. This one looks good. You can find more if you want, but you really only need 2. And now I'm going to talk about, again, my rise and my run. Remember, we're comparing 2 points. Let's see, from the first point to the second point, my rise, I actually had to go down 1. So I'm going to do a negative 1, right? Down 1. My run, 1, 2, 3, 4, I went over to the right 4. So negative 1 over 4. And you definitely want to leave these as fractions. So negative 1 over 4. Double check, is this a negative slope? Yeah, it's decreasing from left to right. That's a negative slope. If you had not written the negative and you realize it at the end, good job, right? Throw that negative on there before you finish. Okay, the last 2 problems, these are my ones that are kind of weird, right? In this case, I just have this vertical line, and over here I've got this horizontal line. Okay, you need to know, absolutely need to know, that if a line is horizontal, my slope is 0. I still have a y-intercept in this graph, right? Where does it cross? Just right there at negative 3. Okay. On my my bottom left graph, I have a vertical line. In this case, we say that it is undefined. It's not a real number. We actually can't even really talk about it. And my b value, in this case, it's never going to cross the y-axis. So I'm going to write none. Okay, I'm going to write none. So that's finding slope from a graph. Just think rise over run, find pretty points, and compare them. On the back side of your notes, we're finding slope again, but this time we're finding slope from a table. And they actually do use delta y here, which we know just means change in y. And we know delta x just means change in x. Okay? All right, so let's go ahead and let's look at this one here on the left. Let's keep in mind that my slope is change in y over change in x. Okay? So you can pick any 2 points in this chart and you can just compare the two. How are my y's changing? Well, -1 to 1 looks like I'm adding 2, so my y's are changing by adding 2. And my x's are changing, -2 to -1. Let's see, that would be just adding 1. So that would be a +1. And then you simplify, okay, well, +2 over +1, right? You're dividing, it's just 2. Okay, so that is my slope. Now, you could do these with any 2 points in the graph, right? I could do, let's do a different color. I could do 1 to 3. Okay, 1 to 3, I'm adding 2. -1 to 0, I'm adding 1. Okay, so again, it would be 2 over 1. Let's look at another point. From 3 to 5, okay, I'm adding 2. And from 0 to 1, again, I'm adding 1. So each of these has the same ratio, so I know that 2 is my slope. All right, now what is b? In this case, we don't have a visual. We're looking for when x is 0. And if you guys are ever not sure, take 2 seconds and just graph that point. Right, 0, 3 would be right here. Okay, good. That's my y-intercepts right there at 3. Okay. All right, in the next one, we have it written horizontally. It's a little bit different shape here. We know f of x is really just y. And let's remember that we're trying to find the slope, which is the change in y over the change in x. So how are my y's changing? Let's just look at the first pair here. Okay, to get from 2 to 0, I'm subtracting 2. To get from 0 to 3, I'm adding 3. So my change in y is a -2, and my change in x is a +3. Okay, well, positive and negative, when I divide, gives me a negative. So it's going to be a -2/3 for my slope. Let's look at the next one. We've got 0 to -2. Okay, so again, I subtracted 2. On the top, I added 3. Okay, I already did that. That's the same as the first one. And then on the last one here, let's see here. To get from -2 to -6, I subtract 4. 6 to 12, I have to add 6. Okay, so this time, if I looked at change in y over change in x, it would be -4 over 6. Hopefully we realize that that's the same thing, right? I can divide both sides by, or top and the bottom by 2. I can reduce this fraction, and it becomes -2/3, right? It's the same. You guys, all of your ratios should be the same when you have these linear functions. All right, so -2/3 is my slope. Now, what is my y-intercept? You guys hopefully will notice that I've got 0, 2, but I also have 3, 0, and we get confused sometimes when we have multiple zeros in a table like this. If this ever happens to you, take 2 seconds and draw a really quick, easy graph. So if I was going to graph these 2 points, the point 0, 2, that would be 0, up 2. If I was going to graph these 2 points, 3, 0, that would be like right here. Hopefully we can see that this is the y-intercept, not this one. That's not the y-intercept, that is on the x-axis. So my y-intercept in this case is 2. All right. Bottom 2 equations. Here we go. On the left, we've got x and y, and we know that slope is change in y over change in x, right? Let me change my colors again to stay consistent, sorry. We've got change in y over change in x. Okay, let's take a look at what's happening. Here we go. So, To get from 3 to 3, I don't do any plus 0. I mean, we could write it like that. Plus 0. And then on my x's, I'm adding 3. So plus 3. Okay, well, what is 0 divided by 3? Do you guys ever do that in your calculator? 0 divided by 3? It's just 0. Right? My slope in this case is just 0. Think about it. If I graphed these points, they'd be 2, 3, 5, 3, 7, 3. Okay, it makes sense that I have a 0 slope because isn't that like going to be a horizontal line for these points? Yeah. So my slope is going to be 0. Now what about my y-intercept? It's not anywhere in this table. There's no zeros in my table. Hopefully you recognize though, especially if you graphed it, that it's going to cross at 3, just like all the other points. All the other y's are at 3. The y-intercept is also going to be at 3. All right, last one. Here we go. All right, well, in this case, it was weird because we had all the y's were 3s, and the next graph, all the x's are 1s, so it's kind of another weird one. Let's take a look here. All right, if I look at the change in y over the change in x, -4 to 1, I have to add 5, and 1 to 1, I'm doing nothing, so plus 0, I guess. All right, so I've got a 5 and I've got a 0 on the bottom. Okay, what does my calculator tell me that is? 5 divided by 0 is, ooh, error. Error divided by 0. You cannot do this. It doesn't work. Guys, this is why my slope, right, error. This is why my slope in this case is undefined. It's literally not a real number. You can't say what it is. It's undefined. You can't divide by 0. Now, what about b? Y'all, when in doubt, draw a quick little graph. 1, -4, 1, 1, 1, 9. Do you see that this would have been a vertical line for my graph? Makes sense, right? Undefined slope. What about my y-intercepts? Well, it's never going to cross the y-axis, is it? It's never going to touch it, so I'm going to say none. All right. To recap this lesson, remember slope is rise over run if you're looking at a graph. And in really any other time, you're talking about the change in y over the change in x. Also recall that we have 4 different possible types of slope.